The one thing that I will say is you don't want to touch Origin eligibility. Origin eligibility is there because of the passion of the game, and that's why it works.
Welcome everyone to another edition of the Billy Slater Podcast. Wow, so much to talk about as the run into September is certainly heating up in the National Rugby League. We saw some terrific games over the weekend, some upsets and a few of the competition heavyweights certainly flexing their muscle. We are here thanks to Tab. How are you, Billy?
Morning, Peter. We haven't quite hit the home straight yet, but we're certainly approaching the bend towards the home straight. Only 6 games to go before our final series, and that'll come fast. You can already start feeling a few of the teams getting that semi-final feel. Watched the Manly Bulldogs game yesterday, and the start of that one really felt like a semi-final. So teams are starting to make their run. Actually,
just on that with yesterday, and well done to the Bulldogs. Thousandth win in their history, so well done to the Bulldogs. But I know they were celebrating the 30 years since the 1995 grand final. There's so much nostalgia there on the day. You were there yesterday afternoon, but I've got to say, watching Billy, it had a semi-final feel to it because, back at, I know Allianz, different to the old SFS, but same ground, and It just had a real semi-final feel to it.
Yeah, I want to applaud the Bulldogs as well, and there was so much detail in that game that they really created an occasion. Obviously, it was 30 years since the 1995 Premiership from the Bulldogs, so they were celebrating that. It was against Manly. They played at the SFS, which is Allianz Stadium now, so they took their game back to that stadium, so that was a nice touch. I thought bringing the 1995 cheerleading girls back, and they actually were a part of the entertainment for the afternoon. I thought that was a really great touch. And then even the major sponsor on the front of the jersey, Laundy, they actually created it in the font of the Hyundai back in the 1995. So a lot of work and a lot of consideration and detail went into that weekend. And boy, didn't their footy team rise to the occasion. I thought that was one of the more complete performances by a Canterbury Bulldogs team this year, and that's really put them in good stead to go on to the next 6 weeks in this competition, and then obviously into the final series.
Is that the best you've seen the Bulldogs look attack-wise, Billy? And it's obviously a leading question to Lockie Galvin starting to look settled in that team?
I still think there's still room to get better. They've been pretty good throughout the year, so it's not like it was like head and shoulders above anything else that they've done. They've put in some really good attacking performances in this year, but he is a really good player, and he's a player that is not overawed by any situation. He's the guy that wants the footy in his hands when the game's on the line. He wants the footy in his hands when there's a half opportunity. And I thought he was quite patient. He played like a Bulldog. He didn't play like a young, up-and-coming superstar that just wants to make the play. He made the play last week when the game was on the line, and he's got that in him. But I didn't think he took a whole heap of risks yesterday. And I'm sure Cameron Ciraldo would sit down with him and watch his game and talk to him about, hey, that's a Bulldog performance. You played the percentages, you backed your team, the team worked really hard for one another, and that's what we need from you. And when the game's on the line and the opportunity's there, sure, back yourself. But I thought it was a real complete performance by Lockie.
How hard are the Bulldogs going to be to break down, Billy? Because Manly tried to out-muscle them yesterday. They had all the answers there, and I'm talking about when the game was certainly in the balance and it was a tight first half. These Bulldogs forwards, they're not going to be intimidated by anyone, even though they may be outsized, but boy, they work hard.
They go nowhere. They do not go away, the Bulldogs. And you're right, the first 10 minutes, Manly were ferocious with their defence. They were physical. They actually had the upper hand in probably the opening 3 or 4 minutes, but the Bulldogs just hung in there. They hung in there. They gave a little bit back, and then when it was their turn to put the pressure on, they know how to turn the dial as well. So they're a good footy team. They're not as big as the Manly pack, but they work as hard. They're tough. They all know their role, and they're super fit. So, yes, they're going to take some breaking down. It's not impossible, but it's a hard system to break because they all work really hard.
We'll move on from yesterday's game in just a moment, but one player I want to ask you about, because he's been there and done that before at the business end of the season. That's Billy Kikau, and just a couple of plays he came up with yesterday I thought were really telling about where he is in his game heading towards the business end of the season.
I don't think he gets appreciated publicly for how smart he is as a footy player and the variety that he has to his game. And I'm sure internally he would get celebrated in that fashion, but he knows when to pass the ball early and give it to his outside men. He gave Bronson Xerri some nice clean ball, which created some options out there. But he also knows how to run hard. He knows how to charge down. He knows how to catch and pass. He caught and kicked in the one motion on the weekend. He's such a weapon because obviously he's so damaging with his running game, but he's got all these other options to his game, and then he's got that footy IQ of how to use them. So I don't think he gets appreciated on how smart he is as a footy player. He knows what to do at the right time, and he's just got all those bullets to fire when he needs to. And he's a wonderful player. He creates momentum for his footy team, but he also creates opportunities for his footy team to score points.
Yeah, he's brilliant, that's for sure. Well, we made mention that there were a few upsets over the weekend, but the competition heavyweights flexed their muscle. Another team that did that was the Canberra Raiders. Knights put it to them early, but then they just went on the rampage in the second half. It's the second week in a row that Canberra have done that. They did against Parramatta the week before, yep. But the minor premiership is edging ever so close. First one would be about 35 years for the Raiders.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they don't win the minor premiership. I think they've got a favourable draw going into the finals, but they've earned their position on the ladder. And you're right, they're somewhat of a second half specialists, and that would indicate a couple of things. Would indicate that Ricky Stewart's got a real nice touch at halftime and what he says at halftime. But the second thing, it would say that they're super fit. You've got to be fit to play this game well, and they're obviously nice and fit down in Canberra. They're another team that would be really hard to beat. They're all physical across the board. They got big outside backs. They make themselves hard to tackle, and they don't play your conventional style. So I thought the Knights actually put up a pretty good fight. I thought they played quite tough and resilient over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, just going down to the Warriors last week and then, fighting really hard against the Canberra Raiders, and it's blown out to 44-18. That's what the Raiders can do to you. You can turn up and you can only have a few moments off in a game or a few periods off in a game, and the Raiders can put 44 points on you.
Billy, is one of the strengths of Canberra, and I suppose this goes into the Bulldogs now, the Storm in the last few years, Penrith in particular, is that a lot of people might think with the Raiders, okay, let's just get them in the grind and try to grind them out, or let's try to play some footy against them. Ricky's got them set for any sort of scenario that they come up against. Yeah,
they're a tough footy team. That's probably their style. And the Bulldogs, the Panthers. You look at the Panthers over the last 5 years, that's been their strength, is actually dragging teams into the long game, keeping the ball in play, and relying on your fitness and relying on that mental toughness to outplay them. With Canberra, they can score from anywhere. Kyo Weeks is having a great season. He's really hard to tackle, obviously really strong through his hips. And he's starting to build that passing game and creating opportunities for other players. And they offload the ball a whole heap, which the Bulldogs did a lot yesterday. But you create offloads through your effort plays, your support plays, how hard you run, and the structures that you work hard to get into. That's where your offloads come. It's not like you go into a game plan and you go, okay, we're going to offload the ball today. that just doesn't work, because that's when you come up with errors. It's more around the freedom of your style of game, and then when you get those opportunities, back yourself.
Yeah, they're great to watch. The Green Machine, they're up and about, aren't they? The Green Machine supporters. I'm based in Brisbane, and they've always had a big supporter base here, and they're dusting off the old Canberra Milk jerseys and getting out and about.
Where was their last
great
premiership?
To see. 94.
Was it 94?
94.
Okay,
yeah,
that's 31 years ago. Wow, that's something pretty special, and no wonder why the supporters are getting excited, because they've got a footy team that they know that can push for a premiership this year, and it hasn't been one for 31 years. So, yeah, fair enough. Get excited. Made the grand final only about 5 or 6 years ago, but
yes, 2019, wasn't it?
Unfortunately, didn't get over the line that day. Maybe this year's their year.
Yeah, fingers crossed for Raiders supporters, long-suffering Raiders supporters. Boy, just got me thinking about that 94 Premiership team. There's some players there. That was Mel's last game for the Raiders in 94. Anyway, we move on, and I'm sure we'll talk plenty of Canberra between now and the end of the season. Billy, we made mention of upsets over the weekend. You and I were in the commentary box alongside Phil Gould on Friday night for Parramatta Brisbane, and at the end of the game going, wow, that was a high-quality game of football. And you've been saying a lot recently about the good work that Jason Ryles is doing at the Eels. I'd rather probably focus on the positive of the Eels here first before we talk about the Broncos. He's doing some good things, Jason Ryles, and that was a deserved win for his team.
Yeah, you can see his principles and the foundation of his footy that he's trying to implement in this football team and club. You can see it coming out in performances now. Made some big calls. Dylan Brown, obviously going to the Newcastle Knights on a long-term deal next year, made the call to leave him out and start educating some of the other guys that are going to be there. I thought Joash Papali was outstanding. It was nearly a devastating night for him right at the end when he didn't pick up that loose ball on the ground where Reece Walsh was offside. So, but I thought he was great at fullback, and I just love their how settled they were in their game. Good players make a difference when they come back, and Mitchell Moses certainly did that with his kicking game. He did 90% of the kicks and put it high and long and just built that consistency within their game. He saved a couple of sets when they didn't quite get out of their own half, and with his big boot, he put it right down back in the corner. So he just made the Broncos feel the pressure, and at times they didn't quite handle it, which is hard to do. It's a hard game to play, and full credit to the Parramatta Eels, the players, and the coaching staff, because it's been a tough season. And when you go through those tough moments, it's not easy to hold your nerve and trust and believe in what you're implementing. But Jason Ryles has done that. And I said at the start of the year, I thought they were going to have a good year. They've been hit with a whole heap of injuries, and I think they're on the right path. If I'm a Parramatta Eel supporter, I'd be sticking with them, and there's some brighter days in the future.
Yeah, most definitely. For Brisbane, they almost stole it at the end. Reece Walsh offside in the lead up to what would have been a match-winning try. But where would Michael Maguire have pinpointed what went wrong on Friday night from his team's point of view?
Yeah, I think they can get a lot of lessons out of the team that was running second last. I just don't think the Broncos have worked out the balance to their game just yet. You can see that they're trying to play a high percentage style of game, and they're trying to work really hard to get that fluency in the cycle of their game. I just don't know if it suits all of their players. Like Tony Staggs didn't see much ball. He wasn't injected into the game a whole heap, and they just need to find out how to extract the best of their footy team and work to the strengths of their players. And once they get that right, and once they find that, they're one of the best teams in the competition. But consistency has been a real issue for them this year, and it was an issue even within the game on the weekend. So still a bit of work to do at the Broncos, but they got 6 weeks to work it out.
Yeah, and they play again at home this week against the South Sydney Rabbitohs, which we'll get to very soon. Another one of the upsets, Billy, occurred on Saturday afternoon. The Titans stunning the Warriors, although they've got a good record against the Warriors. But you know what? We've got to give our old mate Darren Lockyer a credit here on the Queenslander podcast during the week. And in the tips...
He tipped them, did he?
He tipped the Titans. That was his big call for the week, and he tipped the Titans. He's a genius.
He might know something about the game, eh? Darren Lockyer.
One or two things.
What a performance it was. And although they have a good record against the Warriors, it's not easy to go over to New Zealand and beat the Warriors at the moment. The last few years, they have been pretty hard to beat over there. And they've got a little bit like the Bulldogs. They're hard to break down. They're not an easy team to play against. So Des Hasler, obviously the players are still feeling pretty emotional about their coach, and they want to play for their coach. It was his 500th game. What a career he's had, premierships, both as a player and also as a coach. And I just, look, when they get it right, and they completed at 90%, the Titans, when they get their discipline right, they get their long game right, they've got so much talent in their footy team. You think of Jaden Campbell, AJ Brimson. I thought Kieran Foran played outstanding. There was a pass he threw from right to left to the winger, and it's probably his best pass in his career. Like that was one of the greatest passes I've seen him throw. And we all know how tough and courageous he is, but there's a lot of skill in this footy team. If they get the simple parts right, they'll put themselves in most contests. And I'm sure that's what Des Hasler will be reiterating to his team throughout this week is, look at all these little things that we got right. The big plays happen, but the little things are what set us up for the victory.
Yeah, well done to them. And I know they had a heap of supporters, and they took some sponsors over to New Zealand on Saturday as well. So they celebrated, and their NRLW team got a win as well. So it was a double
big
delight.
Week for the Titans.
Yeah, good day for
them.
them.
We haven't said that very often, have we, Salty?
No, probably not often enough, really. Hey, because they're chock full of talent down there. I say down there on the Gold Coast. There's a heap of talent there. It's just a matter of unlocking it all and putting that performance on the park week in, week out, Billy.
Didn't have their inspirational skipper either. Big Tino was out with a knee injury. So, it was a big win.
Sure was. Now, we've got to go back to Thursday night in what was a terrific contest for us to watch, sitting on the couch on 9 at home watching it. But how would have Trent Robinson and Craig Bellamy enjoyed that high-scoring thriller on Thursday night? Would they be looking at it a little bit differently to us neutrals, just sitting and enjoying the spectacle?
Yeah, I get the feeling that both of those coaches wouldn't be happier with 30 points scored against their footy team. They know what wins premierships, those two guys, and it's certainly in and around their defence. I'm sure they're both looking at trying to shore up their defence and work out ways to be more consistent in that part of the game. Although the Melbourne Storm got the win, over the Roosters, there was a moment with 12 minutes to go that Daniel Tupou had the line wide open and he dropped the ball over the line, and that would have put them clear in front and would have made it really hard for the Melbourne Storm to come back. So there were opportunities that the Roosters could have won the game. Obviously, the big talking point was the Jahrome Hughes injury coming out of this one, dislocated shoulder. He's had a little bit of positive news off the back of the scans from his shoulder, and that was that there was no fracture. It came out. It didn't go back in straight away. He had to go to hospital get it back in. But by all reports, he's 4 to 6 weeks. He's going to give himself a chance to come back and play in the final series. That's still not definite yet, but he's going to go through that process to see if he can strengthen his shoulder. And we saw Harmoli Olakawatu come back from a dislocated shoulder on the weekend and re-dislocate that shoulder. So there is some risk around it. Nathan Cleary has done it in the past. I think he did it last year. But I think that's the path that Jarome's going to take is let's see how we go over the next month, try and rehabilitate it and build some strength into that shoulder and see if we can get it stable enough to get back out there and perform for the finals.
So between now and the finals, when we see Jahrome Hughes back in there, Cameron Munster will come back in this week. But what about who partners in the halves with him? Is it Tyron Wishart or does Jonah Pezet come in? Would you expect both will be named in the at least the extended squad tomorrow?
Without doubt, I think both would be named. And both are great options. That's the luxury that Craig Bellamy has. He's not just that both of those players are capable of jumping into that 7 jersey and doing a good job. They have very different strengths. So it's merely what Craig Bellamy feels the footy team needs. And the other luxury that he has, he's got Harry Grant, who really stood up at the back end of that game when Jahrome went off. He was the difference in whether they won or lost. They've got Cameron Munster. He goes all right as well. He can play the game. And they've got a little fullback by the name of Ryan Pappenhausen who, does a fair job when he plays as well. So I'm expecting that Ryan Pappenhausen will be back this week. I think he's been really close the last couple of weeks. Cameron Munster will come back into the team. So whether it's Jonah Pezet or Tyron Wishart, they're going to be supported by quality players and they're only going to have to do their job. So whether Craig Bellamy wants to go with that real defensive-orientated player that is a great ball runner in Tyron Wishart, or he feels that Jahrome took control of most of the kicking game, Jonah Pezet, that's a real strength of his game. So it's merely whatever he feels the footy team needs, and getting those other two quality players back will certainly help.
And just with Jonah, he's been playing with the Sunshine Coast Falcons. He played 50 minutes on the weekend, and he's played 80 minutes the last couple of weeks. We know he came off the bench for NRL as well in that time, but he's getting a fair bit of game time under his belt too in recent weeks, which is a positive. Yeah,
absolutely. And he's been around for a few years now, but he is coming off an ACL reconstruction off last year. He's had a couple of setbacks this year, so he hasn't played a whole heap of football. So he certainly is on the rise, and he'll be looking for an opportunity to play first grade, in the coming years. But whether that has actually set him back for this opportunity right now, does that go against him? Tyron Wishart has been playing most weeks in this footy team, and he's actually been filling in the halves, and he's got a great record when he does play in the halves. So. Does Craig Bellamy go that way and give Cameron Munster more of a responsibility around the kicking game? Or does he let Cameron Munster be Cameron Munster and put Jonah Pezet in to control the kicking game? That'll be the conversations that he'll be having with himself and his coaching staff.
Mate, he can do anything. Jonah Pezet, he guided the mighty East Tigers to a premiership in the Host Plus Cup. So he can do everything. So... immortal status already, Tigers, in my opinion. Yeah, exactly. All right. So much more to get through from the weekend. Let's just go through a couple of other results. Sharks. Billy, a lot of talk about their attack on following their game against South Sydney, where they just got over the line against. This was a really brave performance from the Bunnies, down on troops. They've even lost even more following the weekend with Tavita Totola with his shoulder injury when scoring the try, and a suspension now for Jack Whiten. So, they're running out on troops, the Rabbitohs, and they were brave against the Sharks.
Yeah, I'll start with the Rabbitohs. No Latrell Mitchell, no Cody Walker, no Cam Murray. There are a whole heap of quality players out of their footy team. You take the best 3 or 4 players out of any footy team, and they're really going to struggle. I think they've played with a whole heap of courage. They probably saved about 5 or 6 tries on the weekend, just holding up, desperation. That's what Wayne Bennett will be really celebrating and happy about with his footy team. Tavita Totola's added to that list now with a long-term shoulder injury. He's dislocated his shoulder, so I would imagine that would probably be his season. He'd probably be looking for a surgeon to operate on that shoulder this week. And you don't always get it right. So for the Sharks, they've won the game. They're still in a really good position on the ladder. Sitting inside that top 8, clear of the next team on 24 points. They're on 26 points. So you don't always get it right. You picked up the 2 points. You're 6 weeks out from the finals. Every team is working on some part of their game. Obviously, the Sharks need to, tinker with their attack and work out how to get the best out of their attack. But they're still in the finals race, and they're still thereabouts.
Yeah, most definitely. That's talking about finals races. We're going to get to them eventually to talk about 7 in a row for the Panthers, Billy. We've said it all throughout the last, well, at least the last couple of months anyway, that draw that they had against the Cowboys was going to throw a spanner in the works as far as the top 8 is concerned. Now it may for the top 4 as well, that extra point that they had. Wow, what are you making of Penrith at the moment?
Well, 2 months ago, they were last, dead last. That's an incredible turnaround. 7 in a row. And what makes the 7 in a row greater is that 7 weeks, or they've had buys in there as well, that period that they've won 7 in a row has been through the whole Origin series. Now, no team has had more players in Origin than the Penrith Panthers. I think the Melbourne Storm have had 5, but also the Panthers have had 5. So they've won those 7 in a row off the back of their squad, and we know how depleted their squad has been over the last 4 years. So all these younger guys have actually had to rise, and the McLeans, the Jenkins, Blaze Talangi has come along. I think Lindsay Smith played outstanding on the weekend. He's gone from that first grade guy that's just come into first grade. Now he's a consistent first grader. He's really risen to the occasion and filled those shoes of James Fisher-Harris. I just think it's an amazing achievement. Last to, what are they, pushing for a top 4 spot now. I don't know if they'll get it. They're still 3 points away. So 2 of those teams have got to lose 2 games in the top 4, and they've got to win 2 games. So, whether they can make that happen, they won't even be focusing on that. They'll be continually focusing on the performances that they're outlaying, and that's what's got them in this position. Now they're starting to get all their key players back, and you get a bit of luck through injury, and anything can happen. And the one thing that they do have, they know how to win in September. So that's what they'll be priming themselves for.
Yeah, most definitely. All right. Now, this is the Billy Slater Podcast, and we do it each and every week, thanks to Tab.
Fans always ask, Loza, what was the best era of league? And I tell them, nothing beats the line-breaking, flick-passing, goose-stepping, Vegas-flying, turbo-try-scoring, origin drought-breaking, simply the best era of footy we're in right now. And with more market stats and insights, it's easy to enjoy the best era in footy with the best app in footy.
Tab. We're on.
What's gambling really costing you? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.
Billy Slater Podcast, and time now for the Billy M Medal. We do it thanks to the team at Tab, and if you're new to the podcast, this is where Billy talks about his best player and best team following the weekend. Billy, a couple of really strong candidates for Team of the Week. Which way are you going?
Team of the week, I'm going for the Parramatta Eels. I just think that their performance up at Suncorp Stadium, up against a much more fancied Broncos team with probably more talent. They were without, obviously, Dylan Brown has been sitting out for the Parramatta Eels, had a few other injuries. They started the game with Jermaine Hopgood and Dylan Walker in the middle of the field, two smaller middles, up against Payne Haas, Pat Carrigan and Xavier Willison, 3 of the more powerful middle forwards in the game. And I just thought they really stood up for each other. They had a young lad at fullback in Joash Papali. I thought he was outstanding. I've been watching him in lower grades. He's an out-and-out fullback and now got his opportunity to play in the 1 jersey with the injury to Iongi, who's been outstanding for them this year. And I just think Jason Rolls has done a great job, implementing some key foundations into their footy game. They work really hard as a team, and now they get the opportunity to sit in the meeting rooms and celebrate some of this hard work that they're getting rewarded for in the game. So, Parramatta Eels, the green shoots are coming through, and they're the team of the week.
Okay, now a few candidates here for best performance of the round as well. Who was your best player for the Billy M's this week?
Yeah, it comes from the mighty Penrith Panthers, and it's their halfback and captain, Nathan Cleary. We probably come to expect the way that he plays and how consistent he is with the quality that he brings. His 3 try assists, he ran for 21 runs and a whole heap of metres, and that's his game, right? He's always in the contest. He's always getting the footy, whether he's running, passing or kicking it. He takes control and he takes the responsibility of what happens in their footy game. And, I thought he was the player of the week.
Okay, so well done to Nathan Cleary. Now, that is all thanks to Tab, the Billy M medals. Thanks to Tab, the NRL season is here. For the best time in sport, Tab has the best app in sport. Tab, we're on.
Chances are you're about to lose. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.
All right, listener questions coming through. This one from Albert, and he says, hey, Billy, do you believe players should be able to represent Tier 2 nations and play Origin, or does it dilute the concept of state versus state, mate versus mate? This was subject of a very interesting discussion with you on the footy show yesterday.
Yeah, I think Albert's question is probably a response to Peter Volandi's comments as well, coming out saying that they're going to review the eligibility to international rules and also state of origin eligibility at the end of the year. So, look, I applaud Peter for saying that we're going to have that conversation. I think that conversation needs to be had, and that's due to the landscape of the landscape has changed with the players in terms of where they're from, how they come into the NRL, and also we want to be strengthening our international game. That has a real opportunity to go from strength to strength over the next 5 years, next 10 years, with all the Pacific nations getting stronger. The more nations we can have that are competitive, the better. And that's why there are some grey areas around, players representing Australia or New Zealand, and then, if they don't get picked for that, they can go and represent a Tier 2 nation, which is for the development of those nations. So the one thing that I will say is you don't want to touch Origin eligibility. Origin eligibility is there because of the passion of the game, and that's why it works. But I think the conversation will be in and around if you're eligible for Origin, that's standalone. Okay, then if you want to go and represent another nation other than Australia, I think that's where the conversation is. And for me, I still think that you can represent New Zealand, England, Samoa, Tonga, and still be passionate about playing for New South Wales or Queensland. As long as you're eligible, as long as you're in those states prior to your 13th birthday, I think that there's still a passion there to play state of origin. So that's just my view. But that's the thing that you need to be concerned about or conscious of when you're making these decisions is making sure that passion stays, because that's what sets us apart. That's what state of origin is being built on, and that's what will remain the cornerstone of the success of it.
Yeah, it's a debate that will rage on for quite some time, and I think a lot of people will agree with you, Billy, and what you've had to say there. If you just make it 14th birthday, you'll be able to pick Herbie Farnworth.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think we need to tinker with it too much. It's more the eligibility around the international game. And
Yes.
The other thing I will say is I'm not a big fan of chopping and changing. I'm not a big fan of playing for Australia and then the next year I'm going to go and play for Fiji, and then the next year I'm going to come back and play for Australia. I don't like that. Now, I feel like why State of Origin is so powerful is because I didn't pick it. I didn't think, oh yeah, I'm going to be a Queenslander. That's who I was. That picked me. It'd be the same as you, Salty. Like, you didn't decide to go for Queensland or New South Wales. It just happened. So, I think that who you are inside and who you want to stand there and represent that country, I think once you make that decision, you stick with that decision. But that's where the grey area comes in, because if you say, yeah, I'm Australian and I want to represent Australia, and then you don't get picked for Australia, but you have heritage from Italy, like that's where the World Cup, we want to strengthen those developing nations. So, like, I do understand the conversation. That's why it's got to be a conversation. This ain't a black and white thing. That's why there's got to be some good people sitting around a table and having these conversations and coming up with what is best for our game.
Yeah, for sure. All right, great question there from Albert. This one is from Dane, and we've covered it off a little bit because we spoke about Jahrome Hughes before. We said, hey, Billy, do you believe the Storm can win the Premiership without Jahrome Hughes? Well, I suppose it's a case, isn't it, Dane's question there of getting through to the finals, and then hopefully they do have Jahrome for the finals.
Yeah, but if they don't, that's probably the question. If they don't, if Jahrome Hughes gets to 4 weeks and says, no, I'm out, I need surgery, can they still win the Premiership without their Dally M winning halfback? That is the big question. And most teams, if you took out their Dally M winning halfback that is the glue to their footy team, most teams you'll go, no, they probably can't. But I wouldn't say no. I'd say yes. I'd say yes, they can. And probably because what I spoke about before, you got Harry Grant at dummy half who really stood up in the back end of that game when Jahrome went off. You've got Cameron Munster. We've seen him stand up and really dominate big games. And you've got Ryan Pappenhausen, who's a Clive Churchill medalist that knows how to win a grand final. So if those three guys are fit and firing, and then not just those guys, like it's a 17-man game, their footy team has a great balance to it. They've had a whole heap of injuries in their outside backs. They've chopped and changed, and Joe Chan's played in the centres, and Melbourne Storm probably hasn't been spoken about the injuries that some of the other clubs have had, but probably because they've been able to overcome them. So if they can get some of this quality back into their team and create that competitiveness for spots, I think they can overcome one of those key position players going down. Not that I want to see Jahrome Hughes go down, but I think they can overcome it if needed.
All right. Thank you, Dane, for that question. And if you have a question, you can email us, Billy Slater Podcast. That's all one word, billyslaterpodcast @9.com.au. Now, time for the Ampol Power Surge. This week, we're looking at the top 3 rugby league rivalries.
Oh,
that's a broad
I've had a little
question.
think about this, Salty. I've had a little think about it, but I want you to throw some at me if I don't pick one up. All right,
Okay.
I'm thinking probably more modern era.
Yep. Are we going teams or individuals?
Ooh, I went teams.
Okay, teams. Yep.
I went teams, but I'm happy to discuss individuals if you want. Okay, so I'm going to start with the one that I was directly involved in, and that's Melbourne and Manly. And I think rivalries come off the history of big games. So 2007, we played Manly in the grand final, and we had a great win. 2008, we played Manly in the grand final, and they had a great win. So off the back of that, two really dominant teams through their eras, two really dominant coaches that were in the prime of their coaching, and I think that's what created a real rivalry. Who was the alpha team of the competition? And that went on for years, and obviously come to a head in 2011 when the Battle of Brookvale erupted. So that's where it got to. So that was one that I was directly involved in. Another one that I've loved watching from afar is a real respectful rivalry between the Broncos and the Cowboys. And again, it's come off, the two Queensland teams. They were the two Queensland teams before the Titans came into the competition. And now the Dolphins, they were fighting for, it was nearly a turf war, that was so far apart. But, there was a real respectful rivalry with that. In 2015, they played in the grand final. It was so close. And Jonathan Thurston obviously kicked the field goal to win the inaugural premiership for the Cowboys. But I've loved, generally finished, how many games did they finish by a field goal? There was 1 point in it. It was like half a dozen games in a row, wasn't there?
A heap of them through a 4 to 5 year period, or at least there was less than a try. There was one game, I think, Jimmy the Jet scored a runaway try and scored another one. Michael Morgan scored a match winner. That might have been an early finals match as well, around circa 2016, 17 era. So plenty of those tight games
there. And the third one, and this has a bit of history to it, is the Roosters and the Rabbitohs. I just think the book of feuds, and it goes back a long way. And again, that geographical nature of where they're located, is it Coogee? Coogee's the border of, north of Coogee is the Rooster territory. South of Coogee is Rabbitoh. So that goes back a long way, probably over 100 years of rivalry there, and it's still true in the modern game. So, they're the three rivalries that I've come up with. Have I missed any?
Oh, I suppose we could go in different eras. Your Parramatta Canterbury rivalries, your Parramatta Manly. They've always had a rivalry, I suppose, through the late 70s and the early 80s. There's one rivalry I want to mention, Billy, and it's such a shame we never got to see them play in a grand final. The two glamour teams of the 90s, Brisbane and Canberra. They won, was it 5 or 6 premierships through the 90s, but never played each other in a grand final.
Yeah, that would have been good. And both teams had star players. Like that was it was more the rivalry of who's got the best team. Is it the team with Stewart and Meninga and these sort of guys, or you've got the Langers and Gordon Tallis, and Darren Lockyer was a young star at the time. So Kevin Walters, there were 2 star teams that were rivaling each other. We look back at that. This is 30 years on, and going, well, who was the best team out of those two?
Yeah, exactly. They're 2 very good football teams. That's a great segment. I think you've nailed the rivalries for sure as far as teams concerned. There's been some good individual ones. Might save that for another day, actually. So
that might be a good one. I'll have to put my thinking cap on for that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, now, whether you're cheering on from the sidelines or from the living room, Ampol's got your back on and off the field. Proud to power Australia's own sporting nation. All right, we've got round 22 coming up this week, Billy, with some very interesting matchups. It gets underway on Thursday night. Parramatta hosting the Melbourne Storm. The Eels will be full of confidence going up against Melbourne following their win against Brisbane.
Yeah, back at home too, and they'll be looking to replicate their performance up there in Brisbane that they put on. Jason Rolls has got that Melbourne Storm flavour to him as well. He's spent a lot of time down in Melbourne as a player and then also as a coach under Craig Bellamy. So, bit of master versus apprentice. I'm interested to see how the Broncos bounce back on Friday night as well, up against the Rabbitohs. Again, that's a game that they'll be expecting to win, which everyone expected them to win against Parramatta, but they couldn't get the job done. So how they bounce back and the style of footy that they play. And I just think there's a big game on Sunday afternoon. I think the Sharks are under a little bit of pressure to play against the Cowboys. They're playing at home, and the Cowboys are a dangerous footy team. I haven't seen Tom Dearden play any better than he's playing at the moment. So, that'll be a big occasion for the Sharks, and whether they can just build their game heading towards the semi-finals.
For sure. There's another game too that I'm sure a lot of people keep a close eye on, and that's the Warriors at home to the Dolphins. Dolphins well rested after the bye. Teamless Tuesday will be interesting for them too, Billy, because expecting a couple of players to come back. Felice Kafusi may well be ready to come back into the forward pack, so that's an interesting game to keep a watch on this week.
Yeah, we talk about the Rabbitohs and the amount of injuries that they've had. Well, the Dolphins, I think they've had just as many. Maybe not in their key positions. They've still got their halfback and fullback, and their dummy half's been out for a little bit. But certainly with their forward pack and the way that they've been able to overcome that, if they can get a few of those middle forwards back, that'll certainly help them.
All right, some big games to come this week, and we'll be back next week for another edition of the Billy Slater Podcast. Enjoy your week at the footy next weekend, Billy. Look forward to seeing you. And don't forget, too, we've got NRLW Magic Round in Newcastle, so there's a lot to look forward to this week, and we'll dissect it all next Monday. Thanks, Billy.
It's all happening. Looking forward to it, Salty.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Peter Psaltis. That's Billy Slater. This has been another edition of the Billy Slater Podcast. We do it all, of course, thanks to Tab.